If you are a SQL Server administrator, you are probably familiar with SQL Server Management Studio. And for many SQL Server administrators, and even actually many developers, this is a day-to-day tool that you're using to interact with your databases. Well, the good news is you can use this same tool when you're working with an Azure SQL database. Obviously, you can use it when you're working with SQL Server hosted in an Azure virtual machine because that's the same experience as an on-premises SQL Server. But I can do it with an Azure SQL database as well, and you'll find that the experience is very similar to what you have with on-premises, although we'll talk about a couple of differences in just a moment. So there are a few things that you need to do and you need to know in order to work with your SQL or your Azure SQL database using SSMS or Management Studio. Right? First of all, you have to have firewall rules on the Azure SQL database that allow your IP address to connect. And one thing you should always do is you should always make sure that the firewall rules are as restrictive as is practically possible on the Azure SQL database. One thing I've seen done that's not a good idea is that people basically go 4 zeros to 4 255s, if you understand IPv4, that's everything, and just essentially completely open their firewall up, and you don't want to do that, right? If you know your on-premises range of IP addresses, you can do that. Even if you're somewhere where you're not sure what it is, you can actually open up the Azure portal, navigate to your database, and it'll tell you what IP address it sees you're coming in from. And you can actually automatically, or well, manually, but one click, you add that IP address to your firewall rules. So it's a very nice capability. Okay, also, you need to be able to communicate with the server. Remember, the server represents your communication endpoint. Not only, frankly, for Management Studio, but for any kind of service or anything else that is communicating with your server and your database, you need to know that. Right? Well, it's actually available also on the dashboard. So if you just go into the portal, navigate to the server, you'll see the fully qualified domain name, the DNS name of the server, and you get to it that way. Okay? Now, another thing right now that you need to do is your server, the Azure SQL databases only support the SQL Server authentication. So you need to connect using SQL Server authentication using a username and password that has been created either as the administrative user that is created when you, well, let me use the word create again, create a Azure SQL database, or you can actually add additional logins and users after the database has been created, after the server's been created. Now, probably shouldn't say this because it's in preview, but it's something as a SQL Server person that really does excite me. There's a preview feature that allows your Azure SQL database to tie into Azure Active Directory, thus allowing for a Windows login-like experience in Azure SQL database. Now, before you get too excited by that, it is preview. By the time you listen to this, it may have changed or gone away, but it is something that, if that's important to you, I would absolutely look at that, because that can be a huge differentiator in terms of whether you use Azure SQL databases or use, say, virtual machines hosted in the Azure environment.